Good morning, dude and dudettes. Everybody knows. One take. So, Unit 5.6. Unit 5.6 is a bit difficult to talk about, right? Because this is talking about social policies and they're constantly changing. So I'm going to focus on a few very specific social policies in response to these changes in economic and governmental impacts due to liberalization, due to neoliberalist trade agreements, due to cultural mixing, due to globalization, right? So naturally, we're going to be focusing on a bit more taboo topics, but I'm going to try to keep it as status quo as I can be, right? So generally speaking, this means we're going to be focusing on typically Iran, right? Iran is a country that does not follow the prototypical Western ideology, Western perspective inside of their world, obviously. Really great time to be talking about this, right? So much fun. With that, Iran has some interesting perspectives that we have to understand about Islam, what we have to understand about their culture. I'm not no expert when it comes to the religion or whatnot, so I'm going to focus on specifically about what has happened historically and potentially some changes that have started to be seen, right? The biggest change that we've seen was a few years ago. There's a massive push for more rights towards women. And the end result was humongous protests and, sadly, women being hurt, killed, and arrested for simply just not wearing their hijab, their headscarf, their religious headscarf. For a few years, the government ended up really pushing hard to make sure that they knew that they were unable to do that. They were unable to take their hijab off. Recently, prior to America and Israel's bombing and attack of Iran, was a short kind of glimpse of hope, I would like to say, to where we did see some social media posts. We saw some people from Iran on social media platforms talking about how there was a relaxing of these policies. The ending result is that still in Iran, most likely still post U.S. and Israel bombings, is that there is going to be gender equality and equity issues inside of the government. Most likely their government is going to be 95% plus male, especially when it comes to the Mahallahs and the appointment of cabinet positions. The Mahallahs is a highly religious organization to where there are inherently different perspectives than the Western perspective of women inside of their religious ideologies. And they essentially appoint a lot of the cabinet positions, and the Mahallahs, even though being a publicly voted for community governmental organization, there are people above them, like the Guardian Council, that might not allow for certain people inside the Mahallahs, right? Another one is going to be female access to education and access to freedom of I guess you want to say freedom of just doing whatever the frick you want to do. They are not able to do every single advanced degree platform. They're not able to go to sporting events. They're not able to sing and dance in certain areas of Iran. And there are some serious questions when it comes to just the rights of women inside of these countries. And obviously these social policies are culturally and religiously pressured, right? So Iran is an interesting one because it is naturally not going to be the same as a UK or a Mexico or even a China, right? With that, we also can talk about Nigeria and how Nigeria is split relatively straight down the middle. Northern is Islamic and southern is Christian. And we know that the access to education in northern Nigeria is minimal. I mean, there were many news sources talking about girls trying to go to school in northern Africa, specifically northern Nigeria, were being kidnapped for going to school. Even boys. Boys aren't getting traditional education in some areas of northern Nigeria. They're getting a very highly religious and highly biased form of education. Just reading the Quran, memorizing the Quran, and not going to a proper youth education system. There are some great YouTube videos out there for you guys to watch about people traveling to northern Nigeria and seeing this firsthand. For Mexico is kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. They went from a more machismo society that looked, I don't want to say looked down upon women. I don't think that that's a true statement when it comes to Hispanic countries. I don't think that they look down upon women, but I can say that historically men were the powerhouse of the country. And as of recently, there has been a massive push towards women's rights, which we saw with the president of Mexico being a woman. We saw that with many of the political aspects of the country are now heavily women-based. There are gender quotas, so that means a certain amount of people inside of government in Mexico must be women. And still, Mexico is a highly religious country, so even though we have seen women inside of politics, even though we have seen women rights change significantly, there are things with abortion policies and whatnot that are relatively still, in the Western mind, lacking, right? Russia is still a big issue with the LGBTQ community. It doesn't really, I don't want to say it doesn't exist. It's there. It's just still hidden. It's not supported heavily. Nigeria, again, very minimal LGBTQ community. In a lot of African nations, if you are LGBTQ, you can be beat up pretty badly for just being part of that group. China is probably one of the countries that is surprisingly the most open. It's just politically, they don't have many laws that support these social policies. They're much more just like, if you don't do what we don't want you to do, we're kind of fine with letting you do what you need to do. So if you're willing to be in the quiet about it, or just not flaunting it, or not being too crazy about it, they're pretty open about most things, which I think people are a bit confused about, because when you think of China, you don't think of like openness, right? But they are relatively open. And then obviously the UK is being the most pro social policy. So why does this matter? And the reason why this matters from a political and economic perspective is this can either bring cultures together inside of your country or spread them apart, right? Obviously, naturally, inside of Nigeria, it's spread it apart, right? Northern Nigeria has very different social policies than Southern Nigeria. As well as the argument is going to always be that this can improve citizens' lives, right? The goal of politics is to make everybody better, right? And the end result can be very simple, that understanding certain social policies are going to better a certain part of the population. You just do it, even if some people aren't happy about it. And then the final perspective is that once citizens' lives are better, once people are happier, this boosts legitimacy. And legitimacy increases stability, increases sovereignty, increases all of the great things that you want inside of a political spectrum. So the overall ending result is that these social policies are things that are cultural and geographically very relevant. So we have to understand that, yes, in the mind of a Western perspective, some of these social policies are seen as just kind of like a visceral, like, whoa, really? That's happening? But we have to understand that it's different culture. They look at some of our things that we do in the Western world as, really? I can't believe you're doing that. So we have to be much more open about these social policies, and just try to make sure that we're understanding that the goal is to improve citizens' lives. And the improvement might be a different perspective than you might have of what improve meant, right? All right. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. See you later.